evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Very good evening, Dr. Madhuri. How are you? Lovely good evening to all my viewers and listeners over here. First of all, warm greetings from Bangalore, India. My name is Sonesh Bhardwaj, and as I mentioned, I'm joining all of you from Bangalore, India. I'm a global motivational speaker, a certified life coach, leadership coach, an author, an entrepreneur, a women catalyst, and the most important is youth mentor. Today I'm here in front of all of you to discuss on global issues regarding gender equality. As we all know that when we talk about gender, this is a big area when we have to go and talk. Now coming down to further level of what we mean by gender. What do you mean by gender equality? Gender equality is when people of all the genders have equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. Everyone is affected by gender inequality, whether it is women, whether it is men, or we talk about trans and gender diverse people, children, and families. It impacts people of all ages and backgrounds. Now, let's understand when we talk about gender equality, why this equality is so important. So, when it comes to the importance of gender equality, equality is all about ensuring that every individual has an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents. It is also the belief that no one should have poorer life chances because of the way they were born, where they come from, and what they believe, or whether they have disability. Now, there are a couple of reasons that why we get into this whole concept of gender issues. First thing, when I talk about a very major issue comes because of gender bias in education. Next comes because there is a gender pay gap. Next, when it comes to child gender disparities in agriculture, poor access to health care, the price hiking, the child marriage, and other form of gender-based violence. When we talk about further things to it, lack of representation for women and girls at the policy level, concern and gender equality, uneven access to education, lack of unemployment equality, job segregation, lack of legal protections, lack of bodily protections, poor medical care, lack of religious freedom, lack of political representations. Now, if I further talk about what are the biggest barriers to gender equality, so when we did a normal survey, like if we talk about at a global level, there are a couple of reasons which actually behaves like the biggest barriers. What are those? First, workplace culture, lack of female leaders, gender stereotypes, lack of flexible work practices, affordable and accessibility of childcare, lack of mentors. The most important is societal expectations regarding gender roles, means who will take care of household work and child care, especially when it comes to a woman. I believe gender equality historically has been predominantly a women's movement for women. But I think the impact of gender inequality and how it's affecting men has not really been addressed. There is a huge amount of work to do to achieve gender equality around the world. This time it will take to close to fill this gender gap quite huge as per the various records. This means it will take an estimated some rough figures in terms of stats for men and women to reach parity according to the report. Now, which access areas, including economic participation? Further to that, we also have an element of opportunity, educational attainment, health, and political empowerment. Now, first, if I have to tell you that what are the areas if we fill, we can really cope up with the severe issue of gender equality. Understand the problem. Recognizing the problem is often seen as an important aspect of getting into the part of solving it. Next comes invest in policies to help women back into the workplace. Women have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, with more living with the workforce and taking an unpaid caregiving or domestic duties. Government will need to invest in specific policies to change this. For example, you can have by improving care leave or providing more preschools. Third comes more female role models. Diversity is good for business. More female role models and mentors can assure greater representation. Fourth one, you can always aim for the snowball effect. Companies with more women in leadership roles hire more women right across the board. And if we talk about certain surveys and reports, we need to be being aware of unconscious bias and building strong internal pipelines for promotion will improve hiring rates for women in leadership positions. Fifth one, which I feel is very strong, is consider the quotas. Like if I talk about the highest share of women in parliament in the world, if we talk about in rough stats, there is a very few participation from the women leaders, especially there is a huge gapping. If we can fill that space in an appropriate proportion, I'm sure we can fill this gap to a huge. Next one, design tools for unbanked women in developing countries. For example, without access to a formal bank account, women are often left out without insurance, credit facilities, or loans. New technology and products should be designed with these women in mind so that more low income women are included in the financial system and thereby we can fill that gap to a huge. Next comes the review paternity leave policies. Some countries are taking great leaps in terms of paternity leave. However, several wealthy nations still fail to provide adequate government supportive leaves. We need to understand more about what motivates a woman. One explanation of the gender pay gap is that women tend to be less competitive than men in workplace settings. However, research itself suggests that women are likely to be the more competitive if they can share their winnings, as they are often team players. More, if I go slightly deeper into it, this can help you to inform that thinking about how best to close the gender pay gap. Finally, when I talk about the women in terms of recognizing the value that a woman can provide in supporting colleagues, women's extra effort sometimes goes very overlooked, unaddressed, right? Because see, they are always a very good emotional support when it comes to workplace. I believe they are emotionally very strong. They know how to balance their work culture as well as the emotional side to it. So they can intervene to manage the well-being or inclusion of fellow workers to the best. And I'm sure this should not go unnoticed. This needs to be rewarded. Next one, don't always play safe. Now, with the impact of pandemic across the globe, we know companies do have a default of hiring male CEOs, but global research firms tend to offer leaders with a proven track records or who experience as a CEO a trend that favors men. Eventually, you need to be mindful of this, that this will ensure the progress made is not reversed. So we need to consider the second angle to it, that is by including more women leaders, irrespective of their gender bias. Next one, you address the gender gap at all the levels in scientific fields. Efforts needs to be made at government, academic, and corporate levels to address the gender imbalance in scientific fields. One example, if I have to tell you, is AI systems are not biased against women candidates for technical roles. So some technological companies are already taking a lead in this area, and I think this is a fantastic move to fill this gap to the most. Next one, tackling the patent gender gap. The share of female inventors in terms of patent cooperation applications needs to be increased with their intellectual property organizations. Mentoring and advising less experienced female inventors so they can identify patent-worthy ideas will help address the imbalance and propel more women into leadership positions. That's in fact the most powerful move if we can really do it. The next one comes the need for more legal rights for women. I think legal rights is always an area of quite, I would say this is an area of debate always. Women around the world only have three-quarters of the legal rights of men. On average, if we talk about, fewer than half of the world's countries have equal pay. A legal environment that encourages women economic inclusion will help make progress in many areas, including narrowing the gender gap pay system. Next one, we need to monitor violence against women. Violence against women and girls is still so deeply embedded in cultures around the world that it is almost invisible. And the world, if I have to talk about the gender gap reports, if I have to just go slightly deeper into the layer, we found that between a fifth and nearly half of the women globally suffer physical or sexual abuse from their male partners. So country needs to set up prevention bodies and to monitor the violence to the best, rather than leaving this work to a human rights or women's group. Because I believe if you are a part of a country and you are being a responsible citizen, you have to be considered as a part of your team, not an extraordinary where you need to just give in into a certain groups as a consideration. Make diversity a priority for startups. I think this is again a very powerful move if we really want to bridge this whole gap of gender equality concept. Startups with a diverse workforce reports almost 20% higher innovation revenues, right? Or proceeds from recently launched products and services. But if I have to talk again in terms of diversity, if we can have a proper proportion of male and female as a diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, diverse nationalities, I think we bring the right mix of leadership teams all put together. So this is, again, I do feel is a kind of segment which people need to understand when it comes to filling the gender equality gapping system. So overall, if I have to tell you, this is all from my side when it comes to the entire piece of sharing my views in terms of gender equality. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much. Love, light, and peace to all of you. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.